Hey everybody, I was gonna make one of these videos, but I'm using one of these ring lights. It makes me look all weird and possessed and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't think I won't use it. Stand by. My name is Steven. I'm a simple dude, and I like making sourdough bread. I like keeping it simple. I don't like to wait around a whole long time for things to happen. Just enough in order to make the bread, because anything with enough butter on it makes it really good. I think I've got this thing figured out. Come along with me and see how I do it. So here's my starter. I always keep around 600 to 700 grams of starter. To make your own starter, because there's naturally occurring wild yeast everywhere in the air, and this is how you start a wild yeast, is that just start by putting 300 grams of water in, 300 grams of flour, and use a kitchen scale because you want to work in grams when you're making bread, because as you scoop flour, it can be compacted just like brown sugar. Recipes, when they call for brown sugar, it makes me mad when they don't tell you whether it's compacted or not. Anyway, flour can be compacted just like brown sugar. So use the scale. 300 grams of whole wheat flour to start, 300 grams of water, and then put it in a container like this with the lid loose on your counter. And every 6 hours, I stumbled over my words a little bit in this part. I just want to make it clear that what you do when you have your 600 grams of starter, after the 6 hours, you pull out 400 grams. Discard the 400 grams that you pulled out. So there's 200 grams of starter left in the bowl. And then you replenish that 400 grams you took out with 200 grams of water and 200 grams of flour. Mix it up, put it back on the counter, loose lid, and then let it feed again. Loose lid allows the air to get in there, and so the cultures can start to build. Then, 6 hours later, and you're going to repeat this every 6 hours until your starter is really active. Take out 200 grams, hold it aside, discard the rest, and then put 200 grams of water, 200 grams of flour. And that'll give you 600 grams, and then let it go for 6 hours. If, after you repeated that process, your starter from where it was after you've been fed it doubles in size, then you're ready to make bread. And you will be ready to make bread every time you feed it. As soon as it gets to that upper portion where it doubles in size, and then it just starts to fall, that's the optimal time to make bread. However, if it falls down, it's still ready to make bread. It's almost as if the yeast in the starter just kind of goes to sleep until it's ready and it's waiting for more food. And that could be making bread or feeding the starter again. So anyway, that's my starter. It smells delightful. See all those nice little bubbles? See that? I don't know if it's hard to see. There we go. Yeah. I made this starter at the beginning of the pandemic, probably about a year ago. I have a friend of mine who had a starter going in her family for like 100 years, so you can keep it indefinitely. Smells good. Okay. Let's make some bread. Having a kitchen scale cannot be overstated. This is one I got off of Amazon. Looks great. Power it on. I have a KitchenAid mixer. Some purists will say you should only do this by hand. There is a hand portion to do here, but the beginning stages, I like to use the KitchenAid mixer. So I'm taking my mixing bowl, I'll put it on the scale, and then I will zero it out. After you zero out the scale, next you need to put in 1 kilogram or 1,000 grams of bread flour. So this bread that I make, the recipe, makes 2 1 kilogram loaves. And you'll see how this measures out. So I'm going to go up until I hit 1,000 grams or 1 kilogram. There we go, 1,000 grams. Okay, so 1,000 grams of flour. First of all, we are going to make a well. I like to take a rubber spatula and from the middle, make a little well. The reason I do this is because it puts the water reservoir right in the middle of the flour and it keeps the water off the sides, which in my opinion makes the off of the sides better. Okay, at this point you can zero out the scale or you can just leave it. I'm just going to zero it out because what I'm going to add to this is 400 grams of starter. This beautiful mixture right here. Yummy, yummy, yummy. This is where all the magic happens. So I'm gonna pour this in, and I'm gonna watch the scale until it goes up to 400 grams. Getting close. I'm within the fudge factor, 406. I'm good with that. So we'll stay at 406. Okay, if you've done the math, we're at 1,406 grams right now of ingredients. To make 1 kilogram loaves, we're gonna add 600 grams of water to our mixture when it's on the mixer. Okay, that's what we'll do next. Okay, here we are with our flour. 1,000 grams of flour, 400 grams of starter. So 1,400 grams right here, more or less. Okay, put that on there. And then we're gonna put on our dough hook. What I'm gonna do, there we go. Raise the bowl and I'm just gonna let this turn on speed 1. Okay. And that's just gonna incorporate that and kind of break things up a little bit. But you can see with the flour pulled up to the sides, it keeps the wet ingredients off of the sides. Okay. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out, let's pause this for a second. On the scale, I'm going to measure out 600 grams of water to make up the rest of the 2 kilos. That'll make 2 1 kilogram loaves. Find you a cup that has a capacity of 600 grams. Just so happens I found one right here. Shout out to the Utah State Aggies. Aggies all the way. Okay, so let's see how I did. Just measure it with eyeballed it. See how I did on the weight. Oh, hey, that's pretty good. That's almost 600 grams. I think I'll just leave it there because I went a little over on the starter. But if you do the math, 1,000 grams of flour, 400 grams of starter, which is equal parts. So that's 200 and 200. 200 water, 200 flour for the starter. And then 600 grams of water. So that's 800 grams total of water and 1,200 grams total of flour if you separate the starter out evenly, that's why it's easy math to do. So considering 800 grams of water, 1,200 grams of flour, that puts your hydration of your dough right at 67%. That might be a little dry for some people, but I think it works well for this because I like to keep it simple and I keep the math simple, and I want 2 1 kilogram loaves, and it works out that way. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn this back on to 1. Then we're gonna take our 600 grams of water and just add a little bit at a time. I like to try to add it while the dough hook is away so it doesn't get on the dough hook. It's almost like playing a game. Let that incorporate. Bump it up to 2. I'm not going to go any higher than this. Yeah, I'm almost done with the water. See, there's only a little bit left. Okay, that's it. So we'll let that run until all the flour all comes together into a mass that's pulling away from the sides. Take a couple minutes. see it's coming away from the sides. There's a little bit down the bottom, but the dough is well enough to incorporate it on without any more flour. Okay, if you look at the bottom, it's all just pretty much incorporated. And at this point, put it all in the mixer. The dough needs to do what's called autolyse. And what that does is that allows the flour to absorb the water. And I only do this for about 30 minutes. Just take a piece of plastic wrap and over the top of my mixer, just put this around this to keep it from drying out. And then what you need to do, seal around the edges, like that, and then set a timer for 30 minutes. We'll see you in 30. Okay, while we're waiting for that 30-minute timer to pass with the dough and autolyse phase, we are going to feed our starter. And so, if you remember, I took out of my starter 400 grams, which, as we've said, your starter is equal parts flour and water. So, in order to feed my starter, I'm just going to put back in what I took out. 200 grams of water, 200 grams of flour. Start with water. Set your scale to 0. And if you go a little over, that's okay. Just make sure that if you do 210 grams, like this is showing, do have 210 grams of flour. Here's my flour. And I do use bread flour because it's got a higher protein content. It makes a really good crust and a really chewy bread. Zero it out. So we're going to try to hit 210 grams of flour. Okay. Make sure you're putting equal parts when you feed your starter. Ooh, on the money. All right. Go back up. Anyway, 209. Pretty close. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna mix this up and we're gonna set it on the counter and we're gonna let it feed. You can put it in the refrigerator, but I found that if you just let it feed and get to its maximum readiness, then you can put it in the refrigerator for up to a week. And then it'll be ready to go whenever you're ready. That way it's already been fed and the yeast is almost as if it's asleep. And when you pull it out, if it's a cold starter, it doesn't matter. Just do like a 90-degree water in the 600 grams that you add to your dough. A warmer water will warm up that starter and it'll be active in no time. Anyway, we'll stir this up. We'll see how it looks when we're done. All right, we'll take our spatula and our starter, mix it up. Scrape down the sides. Some of the stuff gets stuck at the top, that's okay. It won't get mixed into your starter. Every now and then, I'll pull out the fed starter and put it in a clean bowl and watch this and just kind of rotate it out. But scrape out the sides. Pretty good and consistent. Okay. All right. So, if you look at this, you can see how low it is. Okay. This is going to almost come to the top of this. probably right around this rim that is more than double its size. Okay, and you see I just took the leftover starter. You minimal need to put back in what you took out. I took out 400 grams, I put 210 grams of water, so I just mashed with 210 grams of flour. And it'll be ready to make bread again in 6 hours. Or as soon as that comes up to the top on this rim and it starts to settle back, then you know it's right, because it's not growing anymore. It's eaten and depleted all of its food, the starches that are in the flour. So at that point, you could either make more bread, or you can put it in the refrigerator, and it can stay in the refrigerator for a week. And then if you don't want to make bread in a week, you just take out 200 grams, keep it, and throw away the rest. You can actually make a little sourdough pancake in your pan if you want. But just put back in 400 grams of starter, which is 200 grams of flour, 200 grams of water. And then in 6 hours, you'll be ready to go again. Now, there may come a time where you forget your starters in your refrigerator, or you haven't used it in a while, and sometimes you'll get this little liquid. It's actually alcohol that forms up on the top. There's some say to pour that off. Personally, I just stir it back in, reserve the amount that I need, and then refeed it. Or if I'm making bread, I'll just use what's stirred back in. I made a loaf yesterday with that same result and it turned out great. That one actually a little bit more sour than I'm typically used to, just because I don't let it go and to form the alcohol on the top. But it did this time and it turned out fine. The bread that I make isn't necessarily a very strong sour flavor in the sourdough because I don't wait for it to ferment the dough mass overnight. I just bake it when it's doubled in size and ready to go. And that's what we're going to do today. Okay, I want to give you a straight on shot of where the sourdough starter is now after I've just fed it. You see his? Okay, you can obviously see there's more volume up here than there is right down here because it tapers down. But when this grows, it's going to grow up almost to the rim of this. That's how active that wild yeast is. But how cool is it that you don't have to buy yeast? This is the way they've done it for thousands of years. And you can do it over and over and over again. Like I said, I have a friend who had a starter in her family for 100 years. So it's kind of like a plant. If you keep taking care of them, they'll live indefinitely. Anyway, I want to show you a couple other things that I think are indispensable as far as bread making goes. First of all, when you're preheating your oven, a pizza stone is really good to have. This one's kind of dirty, but it still works. This is actually with cheese from a couple of jalapeno sourdough bread that I made that oozed out. Tried to scrape it off best I could. So pizza stone. Obviously you need a scale. You don't want to do cup measurements, volume measures. You want to make sure you do weight measures. 2 bowls. The metal bowl I'm going to use for the dough before I divide it into 2 loaves. And so for the next few hours, every 30 to 45 minutes when I fold it, it will be in this bowl. When I divide the dough and then shape them into rounds, I'll put these over the top of them on the counter to keep them from drying out. After the dough is in loaves, I put it in the oven on top of the pizza stone, which actually is on top of parchment paper, which is on top of the pizza stone. I'll use this to score the top of the bread. This is called a lame. And that blade there is the same that your old granddaddy used to use whenever he shaved his beard. It's razor sharp. I remember cutting myself one time with my dad's that he had. I didn't know what it was. Boy, it cut deep. But anyway, great. You can use a serrated knife, but if you really want to be serious about scoring, I would suggest getting a lame. They're not very expensive. In your oven, when it preheats, you want to get, if you have like a thrift store around, go find you an old cast iron pan that you can use as sacrificial. This is where you're going to pour a mug full of boiling water that you've heated up in the microwave in order to create a steamy environment in your oven. This will give you a nice chewy crust, okay? And then when you're working your dough, a dough scraper, divider. Okay, this will help you shape it. I'll show you how that's done when we get to that point. This is more than just for, covering bread, dough making. Use it for a myriad of different things, but this is the economical way of covering things up. Like if you have leftover pizza, get you a roll of this, Sam's Club or Costco. I would suggest make sure you get the one with the serrated teeth. I know it's a little bit more dangerous for kids around, but it's the best way to cut these things. They have some with the slider, but I prefer this. And then once our autolyse is done, which is almost done, waiting for the timer to go off, there's only one more ingredient to add, and that's 1 heaping tablespoon of sea salt. So this is 3-ingredient bread, and it's just so wonderful. Bread flour, water, and salt. And of course, wild yeast. That goes without saying. But, how cool is that? That 3 ingredients to make something's just so wonderful. Okay, 30 minutes up, there's my timer. Okay, so we're gonna pull the plastic wrap off the bowl, right? And go ahead and turn it on to number 2. This will bring the bread back to a mass, pulling away from the side. I use Morton sea salt, you use any sea salt. You can just use regular salt, but I think the flavor of this is pretty darn good. And we're gonna do 1 heaping tablespoon of salt. See that? It spills over into the bowl, that's okay. 1 heaping tablespoon. I like to dance with this a little bit because the KitchenAid makes a little. Just go with the rhythm of the KitchenAid. If you don't have rhythm, that's okay. Put in a little bit of time so it can. You need it in. Like I said, some of the purists will do this all by hand. But I bought a KitchenAid because I needed a KitchenAid, someone to help me out. That's what machines are for. Besides, this is the only electric mechanics you'll be using until we put it in the oven, of course. Now I mentioned this is a 67% hydration dough. That's a little dry for a lot of people. It works for me. It's still a sticky dough. It will still stick to your hands. But doing this in the KitchenAid at first will also help start the gluten and get things going a little faster for the bread itself. Okay? Just need to let it go for a couple minutes until the salt is all picked up. And then you can lower the bowl if you have a bowl left, or raise the head if you don't. Take the top off. I like to just kind of pull this through my hands. See, it does stick to your hands already. It's a sticky dough. I can't imagine. I mean, I've tried to do a 70 or 80% dough like some people do. It's just too much to work with, if you ask me. Okay, so I'm gonna take this dough and I'm gonna put it in my bowl that I will use to fold. See that? Use your fingers to pull it out. Like I said, it does stick to your hands. That's okay. Use your fingers to pull that out. And if you can, just pat your hand on there. Okay. That's about all I'm gonna get off, but that's fine. Okay, there's my dough in my bowl. Then what I wanna do is I'm gonna take the same saran wrap that I used on top of the mixer and put it on top of my dough so it doesn't dry out. Okay. Like so. Sometimes it gets a little bound up. It's okay, just work with it. There we go. Okay, and then just press around the sides. So Okay, so I'm gonna let that sit for at least 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour. Maybe I'll take a nap, it'll be 2 hours. It doesn't really matter because it's gonna grow, the yeast is gonna start to multiply, and it's gonna be, it's really, it's a larger fed starter is what it is. Anyway, and then I'll fold it when I come back. But one tip that I want to make you aware of, this, if you do not clean it right away, it will be hard to get off later. All the extra dough. But my tip is not only to clean it now, but to clean it with paper towels, something that's sacrificial, something you can throw away and soak. Because if you use a washcloth or any kind of cleaning cloth, it'll go all mucked up in your washcloth. You may never get it out. And paper towel you can just throw away. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. All right, so then come over to the sink. And then take 3 or 4 paper towels, and this is your washcloth. Loosen that up around there, because if you don't do this, it is a beast. You might as well pull out your random Morbid sander and try to get it off. Or sandblaster. Check how you're doing. See how much that would be in your washcloth if you didn't do this right now. It is always more satisfactory to clean up as you go. You don't have that many dishes to do when you're done. Yeah. See? Look, a little spot. And then if you have one of these handy sprayers, make sure you get those little bits out of the sink too, because we'll stick to that too. Okay, done. Okay, it's been about 45 minutes since we put the dough in the bowl. So we're gonna take the plastic off. What we wanna do is you wanna make sure your hands are wet when you hold the dough. Cold water is good. And then what I like to do is I'll fold the dough to fatigue, which means I wanna fold it at least 4 times. I'm gonna go over, quarter turn, dip in, over, quarter turn, dip in, over, quarter turn, and lastly, over and quarter turn. What this does is it helps to build up the gluten in the dough, stretches it out, and gives it more tension in the dough. Because we're doing free-form loaves, we're not going to use a banneton. And anyway, that's the goal. So here we go. Just push around back. I like to try and get some of that dough away from the side. Get your hand under there, pull away, and over. Turn, quarter turn, under, this way, pull away, and fold. And again, pull away. I like to jiggle a little bit, that helps. Again. And I can already start to feel there's tension getting in the dough. Even if I try to do it a 5th time, I can get a little bit, but that's about it. Okay. And I'll just kind of tuck it in, sides, and we'll leave it there. Okay, leave it there for another 30 to 45 minutes. Put your plastic back on. I usually set a timer because it helps me remember this here. Sometimes I'll do this late at night and I'll forget about it. And it'll just flow over. So, still salvageable. Just saying that it's happened. Okay, there you have it. There's the dough. Let's sit for another 30 to 45 minutes. Okay, here we are 45 minutes later. I'm gonna put water back on the hand, get it wet. We'll do another fold. Okay, we'll do at least 4. You see how much more it's risen? Here's 1, stretch it out. Quarter turn, stretch it out. With a quarter turn, it's a lot more massive than it was that first time. So let's get a lot more air in it, more rise in it. See how much that is? I don't think I can get a 5th turn out of that, so I'm just going to do the 4. Take it in. And we'll just let it sit for another 45 minutes. Okay, it's been resting for 30 minutes. Time to turn it out onto a clean surface. Nice and see the air bubbles coming up throughout. Okay, let's turn it out. Okay, so this is the point where you're going to need your second bowl. I'll take this plastic wrap off because I'm not going to need it anymore. You can throw it away. And then take your hand and scrape this out and roll it out onto the surface. Now you don't need a floured surface, just need to be on the counter. Well, I like to do it this time because I'm going to use this bowl again as I'll want to wash this out and make sure it's clean before I turn it over to keep the dough and it's round from drying out on the next rest, which is 30 minutes. So I'm going to wash the bowl. The bowl is clean and dry. Okay, you can see that the dough is kind of settling out. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my dough divider I talked about. See, this has a kind of a sharper edge here, but on the back side, it's kind of flat. And that's an important part of the tool right there that we're going to use here on the second step after this. But for now, we'll use this sharp edge to eyeball a center point. This is kind of morphed in kind of an asymmetrical form. If you need to make it into more of a ball, you can do that first. That way you can see more of find the center of the aisle, center road. So go in the middle, just push down. Just divide it in half. That should do it. And tear the rest of it. Pull it apart. Okay, so there's our 2 loaves. So what we're going to do, we're going to take that inside cut portion and we're going to kind of tuck it in like this. Tuck it in, and then by doing so, it's creating tension on the outside of the dough, like that. You can also take your hand like this, cup it, and bring it around like this. That also helps because there's no flour on the counter. It allows you to tuck that in and drag it. Okay, so So we want to get it to a point where it's a ball, like that. And then take one of our bowls. There's my second bowl. Turn it upside down. Put it over top, okay? And we're gonna do the same thing with the other one. Tuck the inside in. Create a ball. I've got a hard piece in there I don't want in there. And then pull towards you to create the ball. And then we'll set this on the side like this. Feel free to pop any bubbles you see. Now we have a ball. And then we're gonna put that bowl right there on top of that one. And let them rest for 30 minutes and we'll be right back. Okay, I'm gonna preheat my oven on 450 degrees. Okay, and inside my oven, I have my baking stone and my cast iron skillet down below that'll preheat with it. And this will go for 30 minutes during this last and final rest. So we'll wait for that to go. In the meantime, over here sitting on the counter, just want to show you this is how much the starter has grown since we fed it. See all that beautiful fermentation and bubbling there? So the reality is that by the time this goes back and these loaves go into the oven, it'll be time to make bread again if I wanted. Okay, 30 minutes. One thing I forgot to mention is that if you're using a pizza stone, it actually doesn't heat up as fast as your oven does. So on this last 30-minute resting period while the oven preheats, it takes about 20 minutes for the oven to get up to 450. But that last 10 minutes will bring the pizza stone up to that temperature as well. And the cast iron skillet will be that as well. And following that 30 minutes, what we'll do is we'll take just a mug, it's about 1.5 cups of water. We'll microwave it in about 2 minutes, 45 seconds till it boils. And then it'll give the water a head start to steam whenever we get the bread in the oven. Okay, it's been 30 minutes. Dough has rested. So let's see how much is spread out. Not quite the circle it was before, but they're not dry. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the final loaf shape. I've got some parchment paper that I've used previously. It's about the shape of the loaves you can see on the parchment. You can reuse this like three times. So do that. Okay. What I'm going to use is I'm using this. Now I talked about this flat edge here. What that does, because it's flat, it's going to catch the bottom of the dough, and as you pull it towards you, it's going to tuck it up underneath on both sides, from this side and from this side. So we'll start with one on the right, because I want to do an oblong dough ball. You could go and just do another circle and then let it rest, but I like to have them a little bit longer. That way the loaves produce more slices of bread that are more equal. Sometimes you can take it here, grab it, pull it out. Okay. About like that. Same thing on the other one. You can see how much air is in the dough. Speaking of air bubbles, that's about right. I like to take a bamboo skewer like this. You can use a toothpick too, just to pop the bubbles that show up and deflate those. Kind of satisfying too, but it allows you to keep things tight on the top. Okay, so some people use rice flour in order to, to dust these. I just use bread flour just because one less ingredient, and it works just fine. Just take your bread flour. And take a handful here, like this. And we're gonna sprinkle on this, like that. And then on that, like that. What you're gonna do, put that aside. You're just gonna dust it all over the top, back and forth, just like that. You see it has still have some bubbles right here and need to pop. Same thing on this one, just dust it all the way around. Yeah, the bubbles really become pronounced whenever you do that. So just pop them. There's plenty of other bubbles in the bread itself, so don't worry about this. Okay, dust the bread. So now we're gonna lift the loaves up and we're gonna put them on the parchment. I've got pretty big hands, but the flour that's around each loaf, you're also going to tuck up underneath as well. Now, the reason why we're doing this and put the flour on is because for this last rest, the flour will absorb the water on the skin of the bread and maintain the tension, almost as if it's giving it an outer crust. And that outer crust, even though the fermentation still continues over this next 30 minutes, it won't expand to the point where it breaks the tension in the bread. Okay, just like that. Tuck the flour up underneath the bread, all the way around. Okay. So I just take my hand like this and scraper, get up underneath it, like that. Once again, if any bubbles are pronounced, just poke them with the skewer like that to pop them. Kids can do this too. This is kind of fun. My kids like to pop the bubbles. Just calls from the fermentation process. Okay, there's loaves. So what I want to do now is I want to preheat my oven to 450 degrees. Okay, the oven's preheated to 450. I'm gonna take a mug about this size, fill it up with water, and microwave about 2 minutes, 45 seconds, which will bring it to a boil, and then I'll be ready to put the bread in the oven. Okay, oven's preheated. It's time to get everything in the oven. What you will want to use, and this is my favorite thing, this is the original oven glove. Manual dexterity at its best for an oven mitt. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to slide the bread off of the counter onto my glove and then put that onto the pizza stone. But first I'm going to open the oven and pull the pizza stone rack out with the pizza stone. Take it like this, slide it on the pizza stone. Now notice I haven't scored it yet. Here's the second one, put it on the pizza stone. Now, take your lame, and you just want to barely cut into the skin straight across. Not too deep. If you go too deep, you'll have too big of an ear. Just barely. Okay. Push that in. Now pull out your cast iron skillet. Go to your microwave. your boiling water. Start slowly. Set your oven for 35 minutes. We'll see how it turns out. Okay, time for them to come out. Get my hot pads, get my oven glove, dexterity, and hot pad. Put this on a rack on the counter. Ooh, look at those beauties. What do you think? Hard crust. Nice thin ear. Save these for the next time. So here we have the finished product. This is cool because the crust is hard. You'll start to hear them crack. You can see the contrast from the flour. And they taste ever so good. Now I would suggest making sure you let this cool for at least 30 minutes so that you don't collapse the inner portion of the bread. But anyway, that's 1 kilo loaves of sourdough. Another tip on the sourdough, if you put the bread in paper bags, the crust will stay crispy longer. But I would also suggest buying bread bags because they're cheap and you can buy a bunch of them off of Amazon, with bread ties and everything. And anyway, it helps keep the bread longer. But let's go listen to the snap, crackle, pop. Like I said before, bread is done. Starter is ripe. The reality is, using this recipe, you can make bread every day. You'll never run out of yeast. How cool is that?